How far can a woman push before the tables turn? When I posted a picture with my ex to prove I didn't care if my husband left, I thought I was in control, until I came home to find only his essentials gone and a cold, factual note taped to the fridge. Why did I still feel blindsided even after I convinced myself I'd already won? My name is Kenia, and I thought I had everything figured out. At 34, I was an insurance claims manager with a decent salary, a suburban house, and what everyone called a stable marriage. The problem was that stability had become suffocating. Deacon Harker, my husband of 10 years, was the kind of man mothers tell their daughters to marry. He taught high school history, came home at the same time every day, and never forgot to take out the trash on Thursdays. He was reliable, predictable, and absolutely boring. "How was work today?" he'd ask every evening at exactly 6:15, right after hanging his jacket on the same hook by the door. "Fine," I'd answer, not looking up from my phone, because what else was there to say? Another day of processing claims, another evening of the same routine, another night of falling asleep to the sound of Deacon grading papers. Our daughter Nora, 9 years old and sensitive like her father, would glance between us during dinner with those worried brown eyes. She could feel the tension, even when we tried to hide it. Kids always know. "Mum, can we go to the park this weekend?" she asked one Tuesday evening, pushing her peas around her plate. "We'll see, honey," I said, already thinking about my plans. I'd started going to the gym more often, partly for fitness but mostly because it got me out of the house. And lately, I'd been running into Julian Rowe there. Julian was my ex from college, the one who got away before I settled down with Deacon. He was 33 now, working as a bartender at a trendy place downtown, and he still had that easy charm that made women turn their heads. When he'd approached me at the gym 3 weeks ago, grinning that familiar grin, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: excitement. "Kenia," he'd said, drawing out my name like it was something delicious. Still gorgeous as ever. I should have walked away. Instead, I found myself laughing, flirting, agreeing to grab coffee sometime. Just as friends, I told myself, just catching up. That coffee turned into lunch. Lunch turned into drinks. And drinks turned into something I wasn't ready to name yet. Deacon noticed my improved mood, my new workout clothes, the way I'd started doing my hair differently, but instead of asking questions, he just watched. He'd always been quiet, but lately his silence felt different, calculating. "You seem happy lately," he said one evening as I got ready to go out. "Girls' night again?" "Just meeting Tessa for drinks," I lied smoothly. Tessa Lynn, my best friend since college, had been encouraging what she called my self-discovery phase. She thought Deacon was holding me back from my full potential. "You deserve to have fun," she'd told me over lunch the week before. "You're young, beautiful, successful. Why should you settle for boring?" Why indeed? I looked at myself in the mirror, admiring my reflection. I'd lost weight, my skin was glowing, and I felt alive again. If Deacon couldn't appreciate what he had, maybe it was time for someone else to. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, calling out a quick goodbye. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw Deacon standing at the window watching. For a moment, I felt a flicker of guilt, but then Julian texted me a photo of the cocktail he'd ordered for me, and that feeling evaporated. The bar was crowded, full of young professionals unwinding after work. Julian had saved me a seat at the end of the bar, and when I walked in, his face lit up like I was the only person in the room. "There's my beautiful girl," he said, pulling me into a hug that lasted just a beat too long. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He made me laugh until my sides hurt, complimented my new dress, and listened to me complain about my mundane life like every word was fascinating. When he suggested we take a selfie together, I didn't hesitate. "For old time's sake," he said, pulling me close. I could smell his cologne, feel the warmth of his arm around my shoulders. The photo was perfect, both of us laughing, looking happy and carefree. Without thinking, I posted it to my Instagram story with a simple caption: "Catching up with old friends. Life is good." I didn't think about who might see it. I didn't consider that Deacon followed my social media accounts. I was just living in the moment, feeling young and desired again. When I got home that night, slightly tipsy and still glowing from Julian's attention, Deacon was in his study grading papers. The house was quiet, except for the scratch of his red pen. "How was your evening?" he asked without looking up. "Great," I said, perhaps too enthusiastically. "Really great." He nodded and went back to his papers. I stood there for a moment, waiting for something. Questions, accusations, any sign that he cared where I'd been or who I'd been with. But there was nothing. I went upstairs to check on Nora, who was fast asleep with her favorite stuffed animal clutched to her chest. She looked so peaceful, so innocent. For a moment, I wondered what I was doing, where this path was leading. But then I remembered Julian's laugh, the way he looked at me like I was the most interesting woman in the world, and I pushed those doubts aside. The next morning, Deacon was already gone when I woke up. He'd left coffee made and Nora's lunch packed, as always. But something felt different. I couldn't put my finger on it until I went into his study to borrow a pen and saw his laptop open on the desk. The screen showed a spreadsheet titled Dates and Receipts. My blood ran cold as I scanned the columns. Dates, times, locations, and what looked like expense records. My name appeared multiple times, along with notes about my whereabouts and activities. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking. What was Deacon planning? And how long had he been watching me so carefully? That evening, he acted completely normal. He asked about my day, helped Nora with her homework, and made dinner while I sat at the kitchen island pretending to read emails. But I could feel his eyes on me, studying, cataloguing. "I'm thinking of going out again this weekend," I said casually, testing the waters. "Tessa wants to try that new place downtown." "The one on 5th Street?" Deacon asked, not missing a beat. "I heard they have good reviews." How did he know which place I meant? I hadn't mentioned the street name. A chill ran down my spine, but I forced myself to smile. "Yeah, that's the one." "Have fun," he said, and went back to stirring the pasta sauce. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to Deacon's steady breathing beside me. He seemed so calm, so unbothered by my obvious lies and late nights. But that spreadsheet told a different story. I thought about Julian, about the way he made me feel, about the life I could have if I was brave enough to reach for it. Deacon would survive without me. He was practical, responsible, the type who always landed on his feet. And maybe it would be better for everyone if I stopped pretending to be someone I wasn't. I rolled over and looked at my husband's sleeping face. In the moonlight, he looked younger, more vulnerable. For a moment, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with him all those years ago. But then morning came, and with it, another day of the same routine, the same predictable life. Julian texted me during my lunch break. "Thinking about you. When can I see you again?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "Soon." The insurance office where I worked was a maze of cubicles and fluorescent lights, filled with the constant hum of keyboards and phone conversations. It was the perfect place to hide in plain sight, to craft alibis and manage the growing complexity of my double life. "Working late again tonight?" my colleague Jennifer asked, as she packed up her desk at 5 o'clock sharp. "Big case," I replied, not looking up from my computer screen. "You know how it is." Jennifer nodded sympathetically. She was 26, single, and couldn't understand why anyone would choose overtime over happy hour. If only she knew that my overtime involved meeting Julian at increasingly intimate venues. The truth was, I'd become an expert at manipulating my schedule. A claim that supposedly required evening client meetings, a complex case that demanded weekend research, a training seminar that conveniently took place at a hotel across town. My supervisor, David, trusted me completely. I'd been with the company for 8 years and had never given him reason to doubt my dedication. Kenia's our most reliable manager, he'd told the new hires just last month. If she says she needs extra time on a case, she needs it. That reliability was my shield. While my colleagues went home to their families or social lives, I crafted elaborate stories about demanding clients and complex investigations. In reality, I was learning the layout of Julian's apartment, the way he liked his coffee, and how his hands felt tangled in my hair. The affair had progressed naturally, from drinks to dinner to stolen afternoons when I could escape the office early. Julian worked evenings at the bar, which meant his days were free, and he was always available when I needed an escape from my suffocating routine. "You're different," he told me one Tuesday afternoon, as we lay in his bed, afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. "More confident than you were in college. It's sexy." I traced patterns on his chest, feeling more alive than I had in years. "I'm finally remembering who I am," I said. "I got lost somewhere along the way." "Marriage will do that to you," Julian said, and I could hear the disdain in his voice, especially to someone boring like Deacon. I told Julian about my husband, painting him as a controlling, emotionally distant man who took me for granted. It wasn't entirely untrue. Deacon was predictable and reserved. But as the words left my mouth, I realized I was creating a narrative that justified what I was doing. "He doesn't appreciate you," Julian continued, his fingers playing with my hair. "If you were mine, I'd never let you feel neglected." The fantasy was intoxicating. Julian represented everything Deacon wasn't. Spontaneous, passionate, exciting. He sent me flirty texts throughout the day, surprised me with small gifts, and made me feel like the center of his universe during our stolen hours together. But maintaining the illusion was exhausting. I had to remember which lies I'd told to whom, coordinate my fake overtime with Julian's schedule, and manage the growing suspicion in Deacon's eyes. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, had started asking pointed questions during our weekly family dinners. "You seem to be working a lot of evenings lately," she said one Sunday, her sharp blue eyes studying my face. "That must be difficult with Nora's schedule." Evelyn had never liked me much. She thought I wasn't good enough for her precious son, and she'd made that clear from the beginning of our relationship. Now, at 62, she was even more protective of Deacon and Nora. "The insurance business is demanding," I replied smoothly, "but it's good for our family's financial security." Deacon said nothing, but I caught him watching the exchange with that same calculating look I'd been noticing more often. My own mother, Bernice, was much more supportive when I called her to vent about my marriage. "You're young, Kenia," she said during one of our phone conversations. "You shouldn't have to settle for a life that makes you unhappy. You deserve passion, excitement. If Deacon can't give you that—" She didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. My mother had always been dramatic, married and divorced 3 times before finding her current husband. She believed in following your heart, consequences be damned. "I just feel so trapped," I confessed to her, "like I'm disappearing into this suburban mom role and losing myself completely." "Then do something about it," she said firmly. "Life is too short to be miserable." Her words echoed in my head as I planned my next meeting with Julian. We'd decided to be more public, to stop hiding in his apartment like we were ashamed. He suggested meeting at his bar, Crimson, during his shift. "I want to show you off," he said when he proposed the idea. "Let everyone see what a lucky guy I am." The thought terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. Going to his workplace felt like crossing a line, making our relationship more real and visible. But I was tired of sneaking around, tired of feeling like I was living half a life. Tessa was enthusiastic when I told her about the plan. "It's about time," she said over lunch at our usual spot. "You've been tiptoeing around this for weeks. Either you're having an affair or you're not. Make a decision." Tessa had always been direct. She was 35, divorced, and firmly believed that women should put themselves first. She'd been encouraging my relationship with Julian from the beginning, seeing it as a sign that I was finally standing up for myself. "What about Nora?" I asked, voicing the concern that kept me awake at night. "Kids are resilient," Tessa said with a wave of her hand. "Better to have divorced parents who are happy than married parents who are miserable. Trust me, I know." Her confidence was infectious. By the time we finished lunch, I'd convinced myself that I was doing the right thing, that I deserved to be happy, that my family would ultimately be better off if I followed my heart. That evening, I told Deacon I had another late meeting. "This case is really complex," I said, avoiding his eyes. "I might not be home until after 10. "On a Thursday?" he asked mildly. "That's unusual." "Insurance fraud doesn't follow a 9-to-5 schedule," I replied, hating how easily the lies came now. Deacon nodded and went back to helping Nora with her math homework. I watched them for a moment, his patient explanation of fractions, her concentrated frown as she worked through the problems. They looked so peaceful together, so content. For a second I wavered, but then my phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Wear that blue dress I like." The spell was broken. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, calling out a quick goodbye to Nora. Crimson was busier than I'd expected for a Thursday night. The after-work crowd had given way to a younger group of 20-somethings and divorce professionals looking for connection. Julian was behind the bar, and when he saw me walk in, his face lit up with genuine pleasure. "There's my girl," he called out, loud enough for several patrons to hear. "What can I get you, beautiful?" I felt a flush of pride and embarrassment as heads turned to look at me. Julian made me a complicated cocktail with a flourish, presenting it with a theatrical bow that made me laugh. "You're ridiculous," I told him, but I was smiling. "Ridiculously in love with you," he replied, and my heart skipped a beat. We hadn't used the L word before. It hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility and danger. I took a sip of my drink to buy time, tasting the sweetness of the liqueur mixed with something bitter I couldn't identify. The evening flew by in a haze of laughter and flirtation. Julian introduced me to his co-workers as his very special friend, and I felt like I was playing a role in a movie. The sophisticated woman having a passionate affair, living life on her own terms. Around 9 o'clock, Julian suggested we take some photos together. "For my Instagram," he said, pulling out his phone. "I want everyone to know I'm with the most beautiful woman in the place." We posed together at the bar, his arm around my waist, both of us laughing at something he'd whispered in my ear. The photos were perfect. We looked happy, carefree, like a couple without a care in the world. "Post them," I said impulsively. "I don't care who sees." Julian raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that? What about your husband?" "What about him?" I said, the alcohol making me bolder than usual. If he cared what I was doing, he'd pay more attention to me. Julian grinned and uploaded the photos with the caption, "Thursday night done right, war blessed good company, and are living my best life." I shared his post to my own story, adding, "Life's too short to be bored." As the night wound down, Julian walked me to my car in the parking lot behind the bar. The October air was crisp, and I pulled my jacket tighter around my shoulders. "I had an amazing time tonight," I said, meaning it. "So did I." Julian pulled me close, his hands on my waist. "You know, my lease is up next month. I've been thinking about getting a bigger place, maybe somewhere with room for 2 people. The implication was clear, and my stomach fluttered with a mixture of excitement and terror. He was talking about a future together, about making this relationship permanent. "Julian," I started, but he silenced me with a kiss. "Think about it," he said against my lips. "We could be happy together, really happy." I drove home in a daze, Julian's words echoing in my head. By the time I pulled into my driveway, it was almost 11 o'clock. The house was dark except for the porch light Deacon always left on for me. I crept inside, expecting to find him asleep, but he was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open and a cup of tea cooling beside him. "How was your meeting?" he asked without looking up. "Long," I said, suddenly aware that I probably smelled like Julian's cologne and cigarette smoke from the bar. "Really long and complicated." Deacon nodded, his fingers clicking across the keyboard. "I'm sure it was." Something in his tone made me pause. "What are you working on?" "Just some lesson plans," he said, but I could see the screen reflected in the window behind him. It wasn't lesson plans. It was that same spreadsheet I'd seen before, now with new entries, and what looked like printed receipts scattered across the table. "I'm going to bed," I announced, suddenly desperate to escape his quiet scrutiny. "Good night," Deacon said, still not looking at me. "Sweet dreams." I lay awake for hours that night, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Julian's proposition. Could I really leave Deacon? Could I blow up our family for the chance at happiness with someone else? My phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had tagged me in a photo on Instagram. My heart sank as I opened the app and saw that Julian's photos from the bar had been shared by several people, including some mutual friends from high school who knew both me and Deacon. The comments were already starting to appear. "Cute couple," from someone who didn't know I was married. "Wait, isn't she married to Deacon Harker?" from someone who did. I quickly untagged myself and deleted my story, but the damage was done. In the age of screenshots and shared content, nothing ever really disappeared. Downstairs, I could hear Deacon moving around in the kitchen, the soft clink of dishes being washed and put away. He was cleaning up the evidence of his late-night research session, preparing for whatever came next. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but all I could think about was the look on Julian's face when he'd asked me to move in with him, and the sound of Deacon's fingers typing away at his mysterious spreadsheet. Tomorrow would bring new complications, new lies to tell and maintain. But tonight, I was caught between two worlds, and I had no idea which one would claim me in the end. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that usually made me feel optimistic about the day ahead, but as I scrolled through my phone over coffee, that optimism quickly evaporated. Julian's photos from the night before had been shared, screenshotted, and commented on by what felt like half our small suburban community. "Kenia, is that you with Julian Rowe at Crimson last night?" read a direct message from Sarah Mitchell, a woman I barely knew from Nora's school PTA. "I thought you were married to Deacon Harker." My stomach dropped as I realized how quickly gossip traveled in our town. I'd been careless, reckless, and now the carefully constructed walls between my two lives were crumbling. Deacon was already gone when I came downstairs. He'd left a note on the counter saying he had an early faculty meeting, but his absence felt deliberate. Nora was eating cereal at the kitchen table, her backpack already packed for school. "Where's Daddy?" she asked, looking up from her bowl with those perceptive brown eyes. "He had to go to work early, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. "I'll drive you to school today." During the drive, Nora was unusually quiet. She stared out the window, her small hands fidgeting with the straps of her backpack. "Mom," she said as we pulled up to the school, "are you and Daddy fighting?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "Why would you ask that, honey?" "You don't talk to each other anymore," she said simply, "and Daddy seems sad." I wanted to reassure her, to tell her everything was fine, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I explain that I was systematically destroying our family for the chance at happiness with another man? "Sometimes grown-ups go through difficult times," I said finally, "but we both love you very much. That will never change." Nora nodded solemnly and kissed my cheek before getting out of the car. I watched her walk into the school building, her small figure disappearing into the crowd of children, and felt a stab of guilt so sharp it took my breath away. At work, I tried to focus on my cases, but my phone kept buzzing with notifications, more comments on Julian's photos, more messages from acquaintances asking if I was okay, more evidence that my secret was no longer secret. Jennifer stopped by my cubicle around 10 o'clock with a concerned expression. "Hey, are you all right?" she asked, perching on the edge of my desk. "You seem distracted." "Just tired," I lied. "That case I was working on last night really took it out of me." Jennifer nodded, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes. She was young and single, always eager for workplace gossip. I wondered if she'd seen the photos too, if the speculation about my marriage had reached even my professional circle. Lunch with Tessa provided temporary relief from the mounting anxiety. We met at a quiet cafe across town, away from the usual crowd of suburban wives and working mothers who might recognize me. "So I saw Julian's Instagram last night," Tessa said with a knowing smile. "You two looked cozy." "Too cozy," I admitted, stirring my salad without really eating it. "People are starting to talk." "Let them talk," Tessa said dismissively. "You're a grown woman. You have every right to have friends, to go out, to enjoy yourself. If Deacon has a problem with it, maybe he should try being a more attentive husband." Her words were meant to be supportive, but they felt hollow. The reality of my situation was more complicated than Tessa's black and white view of relationships. "What if he leaves me?" I asked, voicing the fear that had been growing in the back of my mind. "Then you'll be free to be with Julian," Tessa said matter-of-factly. "Isn't that what you want?" Was it? A week ago I would have said yes without hesitation, but now, faced with the actual possibility of my marriage ending, I felt terrified and uncertain. That evening, Deacon came home at his usual time, but something was different. He was quieter than usual, more distant. During dinner, he barely spoke except to ask Nora about her day at school. "How was the faculty meeting this morning?" I asked, trying to break the tension. "Informative," Deacon replied without elaborating. After dinner, he helped Nora with her homework while I cleaned the kitchen. I could hear them talking softly in the living room, Nora's giggles mixing with Deacon's patient explanations. They sounded so natural together, so comfortable. My phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "Missing you already. When can I see you again?" I glanced toward the living room, where Deacon was reading to Nora from one of her favorite books. The domestic scene should have felt warm and comforting, but instead it felt like a prison. "Tomorrow night," I texted back. "Can't wait," Julian replied. "I have something special planned." Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth, and I found myself getting ready for my evening with Julian with more care than usual. I chose a red dress that hugged my curves, did my makeup with extra attention to detail, and sprayed on the perfume Julian had complimented the week before. "You look nice," Deacon said when I came downstairs. "Special occasion." "Just dinner with Tessa," I said, the lie coming so easily now that it barely registered as dishonest. Deacon nodded, but I caught him studying my reflection in the hallway mirror. "Have fun," he said, and there was something in his tone that made me pause. "I will," I said, grabbing my purse and heading for the door. Julian had chosen a trendy bistro downtown for our date, the kind of place where young professionals went to see and be seen. When I arrived, he was already seated at a corner table, looking handsome in a dark button-down shirt that brought out his green eyes. "You look incredible," he said, standing to kiss my cheek. "I'm the luckiest man in this place." Dinner was perfect, great food, excellent wine, and conversation that flowed effortlessly. Julian was charming and attentive, asking about my day and listening to my answers like they were the most fascinating things he'd ever heard. "I've been thinking about what I said the other night," he said over dessert, "about getting a bigger place." My pulse quickened. "And?" "I found the perfect apartment, 2 bedrooms, great neighborhood, available next month." He reached across the table to take my hand. "I know it's a big step, but I think we could be really happy together." The weight of his words settled over me like a blanket. He was asking me to choose, to make a decision that would change everything. "Julian, I started, but he interrupted me. "You don't have to decide tonight," he said quickly. "Just think about it. Think about what you want your life to look like." After dinner, we went to another bar, then another. The night became a blur of laughter and drinks, and stolen kisses in darkened corners. Julian introduced me to his friends as his girlfriend, and I didn't correct him. Around midnight, someone suggested taking photos to commemorate the evening. Julian pulled me close, his arm around my waist, both of us laughing at some joke I couldn't remember 5 minutes later. "This one's perfect," Julian said, looking at his phone screen. "We look so happy." Without thinking, I asked him to send me the photo. Then, emboldened by alcohol and the intoxicating feeling of being desired, I posted it to my Instagram story with the caption, "Life's too short to be bored." The moment I hit share, I felt a rush of adrenaline and terror. I was making a public statement, drawing a line in the sand. Let Deacon see it. Let everyone see it. I was done hiding, done pretending to be someone I wasn't. Julian walked me to my car in the parking garage, his hands on my waist as he pressed me against the driver's side door. "I love you, Kenia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to build a life with you." "I love you too," I heard myself say, and in that moment I meant it. The drive home was a haze of streetlights and racing thoughts. I felt reckless, alive, like I was finally taking control of my own destiny. If Deacon wanted to fight for our marriage, he would have to prove he was worth fighting for. But when I pulled into my driveway at almost 2 a.m, the house was dark and silent. I let myself in quietly, expecting to find Deacon asleep in our bed. Instead, I found a note taped to the refrigerator. The handwriting was Deacon's careful script, but the words were like ice water in my veins. "Kenia, I've taken Nora to my mother's house for the weekend. We need some time to think about our next steps. I'll be in touch soon. Deacon." My hands shook as I read the note again, then a third time. The house felt empty in a way it never had before, not just quiet, but actually vacant. I ran upstairs to check Nora's room. Her bed was neatly made, but her favorite stuffed animals were gone, along with her weekend clothes and toothbrush. In our bedroom, Deacon's side of the closet was noticeably emptier. Not everything was gone, but enough to suggest this wasn't just a weekend trip. I sank onto the bed, still wearing my red dress, and stared at my phone. Julian's photo was still on my Instagram story, visible to anyone who cared to look, including Deacon. The silence in the house was deafening. For the first time in months, I was completely alone with the consequences of my choices. I thought about calling Julian, but what would I say? That my husband had left me? That I was free to move in with him after all? The words that had seemed so romantic a few hours ago now felt terrifying and real. Instead, I sat in the empty house and waited for morning, wondering if I'd gotten exactly what I thought I wanted, or if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Sunday morning arrived with a silence so complete it felt oppressive. I woke up alone in my king-sized bed, still wearing yesterday's makeup, with a headache that had nothing to do with the wine I'd consumed the night before. The house felt like a museum of my former life. Nora's art project still covered the refrigerator. Deacon's coffee mug sat in the sink from Friday morning, and everywhere I looked, there were reminders of the family I'd systematically dismantled. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The Instagram post had exploded overnight, generating comments, shares, and speculation that made my stomach churn. "Girl, is this your midlife crisis?" wrote someone from high school. "Doesn't she have a kid? This is so messy," commented another. "Deacon deserves better than this," said a third, and that one stung the most because it was probably true. I deleted the post, but screenshots had already been taken and shared. The damage was done, spreading through our small community like wildfire. Tessa called while I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my cold coffee. "I saw your post last night," she said without preamble. "Very bold move." "Deacon left," I said, my voice sounding strange and hollow. "He took Nora to his mother's house." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Well?" Tessa said finally. At least now you know where you stand. No more pretending, no more sneaking around. I don't know if this is what I wanted, I admitted. Of course it is, Tessa said firmly. You've been complaining about your marriage for months. Now you're free to be with Julian, to start over. This is a good thing, Kenia. But it didn't feel good. It felt terrifying and wrong, like I'd jumped off a cliff without checking if there was water below. Monday morning brought new humiliations. At the office, conversation stopped when I walked by. Jennifer avoided eye contact, and my supervisor David called me into his office for what he termed a wellness check. Is everything all right at home? He asked, his expression carefully neutral. Some of the staff have expressed concern about your recent overtime claims. My blood ran cold. What kind of concerns? Well, HR received an anonymous tip that your timesheets might not reflect your actual work activities, David said uncomfortably. I told them that was ridiculous, of course. You're one of our most trustworthy employees. I forced a smile. That's very strange. I can provide documentation for all my recent cases if needed. I'm sure that won't be necessary, David said, but his tone suggested otherwise. Just, maybe take some time off if you need it. Deal with whatever's going on at home. The rest of the day passed in a blur of whispered conversations and sidelong glances. I tried to focus on my work, but every phone call felt like a potential trap, every email like evidence of my deception. Julian called during my lunch break, his voice bright with excitement. I heard through the grapevine that your husband moved out, he said. Are you okay? I'm fine, I lied. It was bound to happen eventually. So, does this mean you'll consider my offer? About the apartment? The eagerness in his voice made me uncomfortable. Julian, I need some time to process everything. My daughter is involved and... Of course, he said quickly. Take all the time you need. I'm here for you, whatever you decide. But even his support felt different now, less romantic and more opportunistic, like he was circling a wounded animal, waiting for the right moment to strike. Tuesday brought a call from Deacon's brother, Ethan, who had always been friendly toward me, despite his loyalty to his older brother. Hey, Kenia, he said, his voice carefully neutral. I wanted to check in, see how you're doing. I'm fine, I said automatically. How are Nora and Deacon? They're adjusting, Ethan said diplomatically. Look, I don't want to get in the middle of whatever's going on between you two, but maybe you should think about talking to someone. A counselor or therapist. I don't need therapy, I said, defensive. I need a husband who pays attention to me. There was a long pause. Deacon loves you, Kenia. He always has. Maybe he's not the most expressive guy, but he's been working extra hours to save for Nora's college fund, planning a surprise trip for your anniversary next month. He's been trying. The words hit me like a physical blow. Deacon had been planning a trip, working extra hours for our daughter's future. How had I missed that? I have to go, I said abruptly, hanging up before Ethan could respond. That evening, I drove to Evelyn's house, desperate to see Nora. Deacon's mother lived in a tidy ranch house across town, surrounded by the kind of garden that required daily attention and genuine love for growing things. I knocked on the front door, my heart pounding with nervousness and hope. When Evelyn answered, her expression was colder than I'd ever seen it. Kenia, she said, not inviting me in. What do you want? I want to see my daughter, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Nora is doing her homework, Evelyn replied. She's been through enough disruption this week. She's my daughter. You can't keep her from me. Evelyn's blue eyes flashed with anger. I'm not keeping her from you. I'm protecting her from watching her mother destroy their family on social media. The accusation stung because it was accurate. You don't understand the situation. I understand perfectly, Evelyn said. You're having an affair with that bartender, and you're too selfish to consider what it's doing to your child. That's not... I started, but Evelyn cut me off. Deacon showed me the photos, Kenia. The whole town has seen them. Do you have any idea how humiliated Nora was when her friend's parents started asking questions? My stomach dropped. I hadn't considered that the gossip would reach the elementary school, that other children might say something to Nora about her mother's behavior. "Can I please just see her for a few minutes?" I asked, hating how desperate I sounded. Evelyn studied my face for a long moment, then stepped aside. "5 minutes, in the living room. I'll be watching." Nora was sitting at Evelyn's dining room table, surrounded by textbooks and worksheets. When she saw me, her face lit up with a mixture of joy and confusion. "Mommy," she said, running to hug me. "I missed you." "I missed you too, baby," I said, holding her tight and breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "How are you doing? Are you okay staying with Grandma Evelyn?" Nora pulled back to look at me, her brown eyes serious. "Daddy said you and him need some time apart to figure things out. Are you getting divorced?" The directness of the question took my breath away. "I don't know, sweetheart. We're just working through some problems." "Is it because of that man in the pictures?" Nora asked quietly. My blood turned to ice. "What pictures?" "Some kids at school said their mum saw pictures of you with a man who isn't Daddy. They said you were kissing him." I felt like I was going to be sick. My 9-year-old daughter had been subjected to playground gossip about her mother's affair. The humiliation was complete and devastating. "Nora, I started, but I had no idea what to say. How do you explain to a child that you've been selfish and reckless with their security and happiness?" "Time's up," Evelyn said from the doorway, her voice firm but not unkind. I hugged Nora one more time, promising to see her soon, and left feeling worse than when I'd arrived. The drive home was a blur of tears and self-recrimination. Wednesday brought the call I'd been dreading. Deacon's voice was calm and professional when he spoke, like he was discussing a business transaction rather than the end of our marriage. "I've retained a lawyer," he said without preamble. "You should probably do the same." "Deacon, please," I said, my voice breaking. "Can't we talk about this? Work things out?" "We're past talking, Kenia. I've filed for separation, and I'll be filing for divorce next week. My lawyer will be in touch about custody arrangements and financial matters." "You can't take Nora away from me," I said desperately. "I'm not taking her away, but I am requesting primary custody, given the circumstances." "What circumstances?" There was a pause, and when Deacon spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. "The circumstances where you've been having an affair for weeks, lying about your whereabouts, and exposing our daughter to public humiliation. Did you think I didn't know, Kenia? Did you think I was too stupid to figure it out?" The line went dead, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my choices and the growing realization that Deacon had been several steps ahead of me all along. That night, I called my mother, desperate for support and understanding. "Oh, honey," Bernice said when I told her about the separation. "I'm so sorry, but maybe this is for the best. You haven't been happy for a long time." "I don't know what I want anymore," I admitted. "Everything is falling apart." "Then you rebuild," my mother said firmly. "You're young, beautiful, successful. You don't need Deacon to be happy. If Julian makes you feel alive again, then maybe that's worth fighting for." But as I hung up the phone and looked around my empty house, I wondered if anything was worth the price I was paying. And if Deacon really had been planning ahead all along, what other surprises was he preparing to spring? Thursday's mail brought an envelope from Patterson and Associates that made my hand shake. Deacon was filing for divorce, demanding my timesheets, bank records, phone bills, social media logs, and proof of my overtime from September 3rd to October 15th. He wanted primary custody of Nora for abandonment and deception. I called in sick and finally hired Robert Chen, a strip mall attorney, who warned me courts care about stability and honesty, not adultery. Friday, HR confronted me with keycard logs and security footage. I resigned to avoid charges. Julian's support turned cautious. Patterson then unveiled receipts, photos, and counselor letters. Supervised visitation loomed. The courthouse on Friday morning felt like marble judgment. I waited outside family courtroom 3, dressed to look responsible, while Chen reviewed notes and warned me to answer only what's asked. Inside, Deacon sat with Victoria Patterson, calm in the navy suit I once chose for him. Judge Rebecca Morrison listened as Patterson presented receipts, posts, and a timeline, proving my lies, my affair, and the fallout for Nora. The school counselor described Nora's anxiety and slipping grades. Deacon testified about documenting everything to protect our daughter. My answers sounded hollow. The ruling landed: Deacon gets primary custody, I get supervised visits and mandatory counseling.